Cole Bennett had everything a man could hold in his hands, and still he rode home each night feeling empty. The men on his ranch feared him, the town respected him, even the bankers spoke his name with care. But none of that touched the silence waiting inside his house. At 32, he had built an empire from hunger, dust, and hard bargains. Yet when the sun went down, he had no one to speak to but the dark. And lately, that silence had begun to feel heavier than any burden he had ever carried. That evening, he rode down from the ridge on his black stallion Shadow, with the whole Bennett spread laid out below him, 5,000 head of cattle, 40,000 acres, enough land to make lesser men proud and weak. But Cole did not smile. He only watched, sharp-eyed and hard-faced, like a man guarding something he did not know how to enjoy. The ranch hands tipped their hats when he passed. Respect showed in their eyes, but fear lived there too. Behind his back they called him Iron Cole. Not because he was cruel for sport, but because he bent for no one, not weather, not debt, not men. His foreman, Wade Turner, met him near the stable. "Western herd's ready to move tomorrow," he said. "Grass looks good by Cotton Run." "Check the ravines," Cole answered as he swung down. "We lost too many there last spring." Wade nodded, then hesitated. Mrs. Holloway came by again. Left another supper invitation. Cole's mouth tightened. Lydia Holloway, the banker's widow, had been chasing marriage with the patience of a hunter. She was respectable, smart enough, a safe choice. But when he looked at her, he felt nothing at all. "Throw it in the fire," he said. Wade gave a dry laugh. "This ranch needs heirs, boss. Folks are starting to wonder if you plan to die alone." Cole turned and fixed him with a cold stare. "When I need advice on my private life, I'll ask." Still, the words followed him into the big limestone house. Supper waited on a table built for 12, though only one plate had been set. The rooms were grand. The halls were quiet. Every polished surface reflected success. None of it felt warm. Later, with a glass of whiskey in his hand, Cole stood at the study window and looked out over the darkened yard. Married hands were heading home. Lamps glowed in distant quarters. He could almost hear laughter carried on the night wind. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he heard Wade's words again, low and stubborn in his mind. "This ranch needs heirs." Cole stared into the black glass, and for the first time in years, he did not like the man staring back. Cole slept little that night. The house held its silence like a living thing. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind through the eaves seemed louder than it should. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, the taste of whiskey still bitter on his tongue, Wade's words circling like vultures. By dawn, he had given up on rest. He saddled Shadow himself, the early air cool against his skin. Out on the range, things made more sense. Cattle moved where they were pushed. Land gave what it could. A man worked, and the result showed plain as day. No guessing, no emptiness. He rode east at first, checking fence lines, scanning the herd. The sky slowly brightened, painting the horizon in pale gold. For a while, the steady rhythm of hooves and breath settled him. Then Shadow pulled south. Cole frowned slightly but didn't fight it. The stallion was sure-footed and sharp-minded. More than once, that instinct had saved them both trouble. He gave the reins slack and let the horse choose. The land shifted as they rode. Flat prairie rolled into low hills dotted with mesquite and scrub oak. The air grew softer here, touched by the faint sound of moving water. Then something else reached him. Laughter. Cole stiffened in the saddle. Not rough laughter from cowboys, not the hard kind that followed whiskey. This was light, easy, alive. He drew Shadow to a halt near the crest of a hill and looked down. Below, near a wide bend in the creek, a group of women and children had gathered. The children splashed at the water's edge, shrieking with joy. Mothers sat nearby, mending clothes, talking softly. For a moment, Cole only watched. It was a simple scene. Nothing grand, nothing rare, but it felt distant, like something from a life he had never quite lived. One of the women looked up. The change was immediate. Her face went still. She nudged the others. Voices dropped. Hands moved quickly. Children were called back. Within seconds, the easy laughter was gone, replaced by quiet urgency. They began packing. "You don't have to leave," Cole called down. The words came out harder than he meant them to. A woman stepped forward, clutching a small boy. "We're sorry, Mr. Bennett. We didn't mean no trouble. I said you don't have to." But they were already moving. Children gathered. Bundles lifted. They left quickly, like birds scattering at the sound of a gunshot. Cole sat there long after they disappeared. The creek ran quiet again. The cottonwoods whispered in the wind. He swung down from the saddle and walked to the water's edge. Shadow lowered his head to drink, while Cole stared at his reflection in the still surface. The man looking back at him was hard. Too hard. "When did that happen?" he muttered. No answer came. Only the cry of a hawk overhead, sharp and lonely against the wide Texas sky. Cole straightened slowly, his jaw tightening. He had built everything a man could want, so why did it feel like he had lost something along the way? By evening, the feeling hadn't left him. Cole stood on the wide porch, watching the sun sink low over the prairie. The sky burned in shades of gold and red, stretching across land that belonged entirely to him. Every fence post, every grazing herd, every trail cut through the hills carried his mark. And still, it felt hollow. Across the yard, the ranch hands drifted toward their bunkhouse, voices easy, laughter rolling in low bursts. In the married quarters, lanterns flickered to life. Through the windows, he could see families gathering. A woman setting plates, a man lifting a child into his arms. Small things, simple things. Cole turned away. Inside, the house waited. Quiet, empty, cold despite the summer heat. Rosa, his housekeeper, had left supper ready, but he barely touched it. Food filled a man's body, not the space inside his chest. Later in his study, he sat with a ledger open in front of him. Numbers filled the page, profits, expenses, expansion plans. He had once lived by those numbers. Each dollar earned had meant distance from the life he grew up in. A poor farm in Missouri, a broken father, a mother worn thin from trying to hold everything together. Hunger had been a constant companion back then. He had sworn, standing over his father's grave, that he would never live like that again. And he hadn't. He had fought for every acre, every head of cattle. He had taken risks others feared, bought land when men were selling, invested when others hesitated. He had built something strong, something lasting, but somewhere along the way, he had lost something else. He closed the ledger. A knock came at the door. "Come in." Wade stepped inside, hat in hand. "Didn't mean to bother you, boss. Just thought you should know. Darren Holt's been sniffing around again." Cole's eyes narrowed. Let him sniff. He's offering double for those creek water rights. "Doesn't matter if he offers 10 times, Cole said flatly. "A man who controls the water controls the land. He knows it, so do I." Wade shifted. "He's been talking in town too." "What kind of talking?" "Says you're getting soft. Says all that money's made you forget where you came from." Cole's expression went still. "Is that so?" "Just repeating what I heard," Wade said carefully. "Some folks are listening." Cole rose slowly from his chair. "Then maybe it's time I remind them," he said, voice low and steady. "Exactly whose land this is." After Wade left, Cole poured himself another drink and returned to the window. The ranch lay quiet beneath the rising night, strong, powerful, untouchable. And yet, as he stared out into the darkness, that same thought crept back in. Heavier than before. What good is all of it, if there's no one to share it with? The town of Red Hollow wasn't much to look at. A handful of wooden buildings leaned along a dusty street, sun-faded and wind-worn. It was the kind of place men passed through more often than they stayed. But for Lila Dawson, it was the only home she had left. At 19, she had already buried more than most. Fever had taken both her parents in the same week. One day she had a family. The next she had nothing but a small room above a store and a life, built on other people's mercy. "Lila," Mrs. Carver's sharp voice cut through the quiet morning. "Those shelves won't stock themselves." "Coming, ma'am," Lila answered quickly. She pinned up her long brown hair and smoothed down her faded dress. It had been mended so many times the original fabric barely showed anymore. Downstairs the air was already thick with heat. She moved quickly, sweeping, dusting, arranging goods before the first customers arrived. Her hands never stopped. If they did, Mrs. Carver noticed. "Mind those jars," the older woman snapped. "You break anything else, it comes out of your pay." "Yes, ma'am." Lila didn't argue. Arguing never helped. The morning passed in a blur. Ranchers came in for supplies. Their wives picked through fabrics. Children reached for candy they knew Lila wasn't allowed to touch. To them, she wasn't a person, just the Dawson girl. A girl with no family, no dowry, no place. "Did you hear about Cole Bennett?" one woman whispered as Lila measured cloth. "Richest man in 3 counties, the other replied. "And still not married. Lydia Holloway's near desperate to catch him. Can't blame her. Man's got more land than sense. Though I hear he's colder than winter steel." Lila kept her eyes on her work. She had seen him before. Tall, quiet, distant. A man who looked like he belonged to the land more than to people. "What about that Dawson girl?" the first woman added, her voice dropping just enough to sting. "Pretty enough, but no prospects. She'll be lucky to end up as a servant. Or worse," the other muttered. Girls without protection don't stay untouched long. Lila's fingers tightened slightly around the fabric, but she said nothing. She wrapped the cloth neatly, handed it over, and offered a polite smile that never reached her eyes. By noon, the heat had driven most folks inside. The store went quiet. Mrs. Carver retreated for her nap, leaving Lila alone. For a moment, she stood by the window, watching dust drift along the empty street. Somewhere out there, she thought, there had to be more than this. A place where she wasn't just the girl people pitied or whispered about. A place where she could breathe. "You'll go blind staring at nothing." The voice came too close. Lila flinched and turned. Mr. Carver stood behind her, smelling of tobacco and something sour. "I was just watching for customers," she said, stepping away. He followed. "Such a pretty thing," he murmured, his smile slow and wrong. "A man notices that." Her stomach tightened. She moved toward the counter, putting space between them. "Yes, sir. A girl like you needs protection," he went on, leaning closer. "Someone to take care of her future." Lila's hands clenched at her sides. Mrs. Carver was upstairs. No one else was in the store. And Mr. Carver was still moving closer. Lila's back brushed the edge of the counter. There was nowhere else to step. Mr. Carver leaned in, one hand resting too close, his voice low and thick. "You don't have to live like this, girl. I could make things easier for you." Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. "Mrs. Carver has been very kind to me," she said carefully, forcing her voice steady. He smiled. "Kindness doesn't have to be shared." His hand moved, not fast, not sudden, slow, like he had all the time in the world. Lila's breath caught. The bell above the door rang sharp and sudden. Both of them turned. Wade Turner stepped inside, dust on his coat, eyes quick and sharp as they took in the room. He paused just long enough to understand what he was seeing. "Afternoon," Wade said evenly. "Miss Dawson." "Mr. Carver." Mr. Carver stepped back at once, clearing his throat. "Just discussing inventory." "Looks like you've got it handled," Wade replied, though his gaze lingered a moment longer than polite. Lila felt her knees weaken with relief. "What can I get you?" she asked, moving quickly to the far side of the counter. "Supplies for the Bennett ranch," Wade said, pulling out a folded list. She took it, their fingers brushing lightly. This time she didn't pull away. She just breathed. As she gathered the items, Wade made easy conversation, filling the space with normal sound. It pushed the tension out of the room like fresh air through an open window. "Hot day," he said. "Yes, sir." "Thinking of stopping by the creek on the way back," he added. "There's a swimming hole about 3 miles south. Quiet place. Good water." Lila glanced up. "Sounds nice," she said softly. "It is. Best times early morning or late evening. Nobody around. Nobody around." The words settled deep. After Wade left, the day dragged on. Mr. Carver stayed too close. Mrs. Carver snapped over nothing. The walls felt tighter, the air heavier. By the time the store closed, Lila felt worn thin. "Don't think you're finished," Mrs. Carver said sharply. "Every shelf gets dusted before you even think about rest." "Yes, ma'am." It was long past dark when Lila finally climbed the narrow stairs to her room. Her supper sat waiting, cold, dry. She ate without tasting. Then she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at nothing. The creek, clear water, silence, freedom. For the first time in a long while, a small, quiet thought rose inside her. What if, just once, she chose something for herself? She lay down, but sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, she dreamed of water, of washing everything away, of stepping into a place where no one watched her, judged her, or reached for her without permission. And when she woke before dawn, the decision was already made. Before the first light touched the sky, Lila was already awake. Her heart beat fast, not from fear alone, but from something new, something bold. She dressed quickly in her oldest dress, the one no one would question if it came back stained or torn. Her fingers moved in silence, careful, steady. Every small sound felt too loud in the stillness. Downstairs the house slept. Mrs. Carver would not rise for hours. Mr. Carver would already be at the saloon, drowning himself in cards and whiskey before sunrise. The world for this brief moment belonged to no one. Lila slipped out the back door. Cool air wrapped around her like a blessing. She paused for just a second, breathing it in. Then she walked. At first she stayed close to the buildings, moving through shadows like she was stealing something she had no right to take. But once she reached the edge of town, she broke into a run. It felt good, free. Her feet carried her along the narrow trail that followed the creek. The land slowly opened around her, The dust faded. The air softened. The sound of water grew louder, steady, and inviting. 3 miles. It didn't feel far today. Then she saw it. A wide, clear pool where the creek deepened and slowed, tucked between trees that leaned close as if guarding it. Water slipped over smooth rocks in a quiet fall, catching the early light. Lila stopped at the edge. For a moment she just stared. It was beautiful, untouched, private. She looked around carefully. No riders, no voices, no movement beyond the wind and the leaves. She was alone, truly alone. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the buttons of her dress. Each piece of clothing she removed felt like shedding something heavier than fabric. The long days, the whispers, the watching eyes, the hands that lingered too long, all of it slipped away. When she stood at the water's edge and only her shift, she hesitated. A breath, a pause, then she stepped forward. The water touched her toes, cool and sharp. She gasped softly, then smiled without meaning to. She moved deeper, slowly, carefully, until the water reached her waist. Then, with a quiet breath, she dipped under. The world vanished. When she came up, water streaming from her hair, something inside her broke loose. She laughed. Not the quiet, careful laugh she used in town. A real one. Bright, free. She floated on her back, staring up at the sky. The clouds drifted above her like they had nowhere else to be. For this moment, she wasn't the Dawson girl. She wasn't anyone's burden. She was just Lila. Alive. Free. Time slipped away. She moved through the water without hurry, letting it hold her, letting it take everything heavy and wash it clean. She didn't hear the horse, didn't hear the slow approach along the trail, didn't see the rider crest the hill above her. She only noticed when it was too late, a sharp intake of breath, not her own. Lila froze. Her head snapped up, and there, at the edge of the pool, sitting tall on a black stallion, was Cole Bennett. For a moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to stretch thin, like the air had forgotten how to breathe. Lila stood frozen in the shallow water, her shift clinging to her skin, her hair dripping down her shoulders. Every part of her felt exposed, not just her body, but something deeper, something she had never shown anyone. Cole sat rigid in the saddle. His usual calm was gone. His eyes, cold and steady in every other moment, were wide now, fixed on her like he had never seen anything like this before. Lila's mind went blank. Then it came rushing back all at once. Shame, panic, fear. With a soft cry, she turned and splashed toward the bank, her hands trying to cover herself as she reached for her clothes. I'm sorry. Cole's voice broke the silence. It sounded different, rough, uncertain. I didn't know anyone was here. He pulled sharply on the reins, turning shadow away so his back faced her. But it didn't undo anything. Lila's fingers shook as she struggled into her dress, the damp fabric clinging stubbornly. Tears blurred her vision, hot and sudden. Please, she whispered, barely able to form the words. Please don't tell anyone. Her voice cracked. Please forget this happened. Cole didn't turn. I will, he said quietly. You have my word. The words should have brought comfort. They didn't, because something had already changed. Lila fastened the last button with trembling hands. Her breath came fast, uneven. She wiped her face, but the tears kept coming anyway. I should go, Cole added after a moment. Still facing away. I apologize. He nudged the stallion forward, but just before he reached the rise, something pulled him back. He glanced over his shoulder. Their eyes met again, only for a second. His were darker now, not cold. Something else lived there, something she didn't understand. Then he was gone, vanished over the hill like he had never been there at all. The sound of hooves faded into the distance. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. Lila stood there alone again, but not free anymore. Her chest tightened as she sank slowly to the ground, her hands gripping the fabric of her dress. What had she done? What had he seen? The moment that had felt like freedom now burned with humiliation. The water that had felt like cleansing now felt like something she had lost. She had been seen, not by just anyone, by him, the most powerful man for miles, the man people whispered about, the man who could change lives without lifting a hand. Lila forced herself to stand. She gathered what little strength she had left and began the walk back. Each step felt heavier than the last. The sun had fully risen now, casting light over everything, over the trail, over the town waiting ahead, over the life she had just complicated beyond repair. By the time she reached the back door of the store, her absence had gone unnoticed. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. 3 days passed, and nothing felt the same. Cole Bennett tried to bury himself in work, but the numbers refused to hold his attention. The ledgers blurred. Conversations drifted off halfway through. Even the steady rhythm of ranch life felt Off. Wade noticed first. You sure you're all right, boss? He asked one morning, watching Cole stare out across the yard like he'd forgotten why he was standing there. I'm fine, Cole said too quickly. Wade didn't look convinced. Cole turned away, jaw tightening. The truth was simple. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The image had burned itself into his mind. The water. The light. The way she had looked before she realized he was there. Free in a way he had never seen in anyone. He had seen beautiful women before. Plenty of them. None of them had undone him like this. And that was the problem. He knew who she was now. Lila Dawson. The girl from the general store. Quiet, poor, easily overlooked. Except now she was all he could see. On the fourth morning, Cole made a decision. He rode into Red Hollow on the excuse of supplies. But even he knew that wasn't the real reason. The town was alive with movement as usual. Wagons creaked along the street. Dust rose in lazy clouds. Voices carried in low, steady hums. Cole tied shadow outside the store. For a moment, he didn't move. Through the window, he saw her. Behind the counter, helping a customer, head lowered, hands steady. But there was tension in her shoulders now. A stiffness that hadn't been there before. He stepped inside. The bell rang. Lila looked up. Their eyes met. All the color drained from her face, then rushed back all at once. The fabric slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. Careful, Mrs. Carver snapped. Then her tone shifted instantly. Mr. Bennett. What a surprise. How can we help you today? Supplies, Cole said, his voice rougher than he intended. He pulled out a list. Mrs. Carver smiled too wide. Lila, stop dawdling and assist Mr. Bennett properly. Lila moved toward him slowly, like she was walking toward something she couldn't escape. What can I get for you, sir? She asked softly. He handed her the list. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back fast, like it burned. I'll gather these, she said, turning away quickly. Cole watched her move through the store. He hadn't noticed before. Not really. Now he saw everything. The way she carried herself, the quiet strength beneath the fear, the grace she didn't even seem aware of. She's a good girl. Mr. Carver's voice slid in beside him. Cole didn't turn. Works hard. Grateful, the man continued, a smile creeping into his tone. And accommodating when needed. Cole's jaw tightened. Meaning? He asked, voice low. Mr. Carver chuckled. A man like you gets lonely. A girl like her, well, she knows how to survive. Arrangements can be made. The world went still. Cole turned. Slowly. Say that again. The smile faltered. I just meant... Get out. Mr. Carver blinked. This is, Get out, Cole repeated quieter this time. Or I'll throw you through that window. Something in his eyes made the man step back, then turn, then disappear. Lila returned just as the tension settled into silence again. Is everything all right? She asked, holding the supplies close to her chest. Cole looked at her, and for a second, everything else faded. Fine, he said. Then softer, you don't owe anyone anything. Her eyes filled, but she looked away and said nothing at all. Cole loaded the supplies onto his saddle without speaking another word. Lila stayed inside. She did not look at him again, but he felt her there, felt the weight of what had passed between them. And what hadn't been said. As he tightened the last strap, something inside him settled into a decision. Clear, final. He turned and walked back into the store. Mrs. Carver stood behind the counter counting coins. I need a house manager, Cole said without greeting. Someone to oversee supplies, accounts, and household operations at the ranch. Her eyes lit up instantly. Well now, I might know someone suitable. I want Lila Dawson. The smile widened. She's valuable here, Mr. Bennett, hard worker, reliable. I'll pay double what you're giving her. Mrs. Carver didn't even hesitate. Done. Triple, Cole added flatly. And she starts Monday. Of course, she said quickly, already calculating profit. I'll inform her myself. Cole gave a short nod and left before Lila could return, before he could see her reaction, before he could question his own reasoning. Halfway back to the ranch, the truth caught up with him. He hadn't done it just to help her. He had done it because he couldn't stand the thought of her staying there. Under that man's roof, because he wanted her close, and that made things dangerous. By evening, the news had spread through Red Hollow like dry grass catching fire. Everyone knew, and everyone had something to say. I told you that girl was trouble, Lydia Holloway said sharply at the church gathering. First she sneaks off at dawn, now she's working for him. It's obvious what she's done. What do you mean? Another woman leaned closer. My cousin saw her heading out of town that morning, Lydia whispered. Came back soaked and looking guilty. And now this? It doesn't take much thinking. The poison moved fast. By the time Lila heard the news, it had already twisted into something ugly. Mrs. Carver delivered it with a smile that cut deep. "You start Monday at the Bennett ranch," she said. "Quite the promotion." Lila blinked. "I didn't ask for this." "No," Mrs. Carver said, voice sharp with amusement. "You didn't have to. Men like him don't make offers without reason." Lila's stomach dropped. "What are people saying?" she asked quietly. "Oh, child," the woman laughed. "You really don't know." Lila's hands tightened. "They're saying you've caught his interest the only way a girl like you can." The words hit like a slap. "It wasn't like that," Lila said quickly. "He came upon me by accident." "Of course he did." The sarcasm was cruel. "Just remember," Mrs. Carver added, leaning closer, "when a man like Cole Bennett gets bored, girls like you don't land on their feet." That night Lila sat alone in her small room. The walls felt tighter than ever. She had wanted escape, but not like this. Not with every eye watching her, judging her, turning her into something she wasn't. Still, beneath the fear, something else stirred, a quiet, steady pull, because no matter what people said, when Cole Bennett had looked at her, it hadn't felt like pity. The next day felt longer than any before it. Lila could feel the town watching her. Every step she took, every word she spoke. Conversations fell quiet when she passed. Eyes followed her like shadows. Some held curiosity. Others held judgment. A few held something worse. By Sunday, even the church offered no shelter. When she stepped inside, the whispers started before she reached the second row. The minister's wife shifted away from her bench, just enough to make the message clear. Lila kept her head high. But inside, something ached. Only Wade greeted her the same as always when he came to collect her Monday morning. "Don't mind them," he said as he loaded her small bundle into the wagon. "Folks like talking more than they like thinking." "They're saying terrible things," she murmured. "They said worse about Cole when he first made his fortune," Wade replied. "People don't like it when someone steps outside their place." Lila looked down at her hands. "Maybe they're right." Wade shook his head. "No, miss. They're just loud." The ride to the ranch felt unreal. The Bennett place rose from the land like something out of another world. Stone walls, wide windows, endless space stretching in every direction. It wasn't just big, it was powerful. Ranch hands paused to watch as the wagon rolled in. Their eyes followed her, not with the same hunger she felt in town, but with curiosity, and something like surprise. Inside, everything felt even larger, rooms wide enough to echo, floors polished smooth, light pouring through tall windows. Rosa, the housekeeper, greeted her with kind eyes. "You don't listen to men who talk too much," she said gently. "Mr. Cole, he is a good man. Just alone." Alone. The word settled deep. Rosa showed her through the house, then to her room. Lila stopped in the doorway. It was bigger than anything she had ever slept in. A real bed. A window that opened to the land. Clean linens. It didn't feel real. "You eat with family," Rosa added softly. Family. Lila swallowed. That meant him. The day passed in quiet work. Numbers, supplies, lists. It kept her mind steady, kept her from thinking too much. But evening came anyway, and with it, the dinner bell. Lila stood outside the dining room door for a long moment. Her hand hovered. Then she pushed it open. Cole was already there. He stood when she entered. The gesture startled her. No one had ever stood for her before. "Miss Dawson," he said quietly, "I hope you're settling in." "Yes, thank you." She took her seat. The table stretched long between them, set for two. Too far, and somehow not far enough. For a while they ate in silence. Then Cole set down his fork. "I want to be clear," he said. "You're here as an employee. Nothing else." Lila's chest tightened. "I know what they're saying," she said softly. His jaw hardened. "They're wrong. That won't stop them." "No," he admitted. "But it doesn't make them right." Silence fell again. Then he asked quietly, "Why were you at the creek that morning?" Lila hesitated, then answered, "I wanted to feel clean." She lifted her eyes to his, not just from dirt, from everything. And for the first time, Cole Bennett didn't look like a man made of iron. Cole didn't look away. Not this time. Something in his face shifted. Not the hard lines people knew, not the quiet control he carried like armor. This was different, softer, almost uncertain. "I understand that," he said quietly. Lila's brow furrowed. "Do you?" she asked, her voice steady but searching. "When have you ever been anything but this?" She gestured faintly around them. "The man everyone answers to?" For a moment he said nothing. Then he leaned back slightly, his gaze lowering. When I was a boy, he began, I wasn't Cole Bennett. I was just Cole, oldest of 6, watching my father lose everything one bad season at a time. His voice stayed calm, but something deeper moved beneath it. We didn't have land worth naming. Barely had food some winters. I remember my mother, working until her hands bled just to keep us going. Lila listened, still and quiet. I swore I'd never live like that again, he continued. Never depend on anyone. Never come up short. And you didn't, she said softly. No, he agreed. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being anything else. The words hung between them, heavy, honest. Lila saw him differently now. Not just the man people feared, but the boy he had buried. I didn't know, she whispered. Not many do, he replied. I made sure of that. A small silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just real. I'm sorry, Lila said after a moment. For judging you. And for that morning. She looked down briefly. I shouldn't have been there like that. Cole's voice sharpened, but not with anger. You did nothing wrong. She glanced up, surprised. You deserved that moment, he added. More than anyone I've seen in a long time. Her eyes softened. Something warm passed between them. Unspoken, uncertain, but there. Then Cole cleared his throat, as if catching himself. I'll be away for a few days, he said, his tone returning to something more controlled. Business to handle. Lila nodded slowly. He was stepping back, putting distance where something had begun to close. I understand. He stood. She followed. For a second, they faced each other across the long table. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Then Cole gave a short nod.
Good night, Miss Dawson.
Good night, Mr. Bennett. He turned and left the room. Lila remained where she was. Her hands rested lightly on the table. Her heart felt different, still unsure, still guarded, but no longer alone in the way it had been before. Upstairs in his study, Cole poured a drink and didn't touch it. Her words stayed with him, her voice, her honesty. He had hired her to fix a problem, to protect her. That had been the reason. At least, that's what he had told himself. But sitting across from her, hearing her speak, seeing her not as a girl the town dismissed but as something strong and real, he knew the truth now. This wasn't simple, and it wasn't safe. Because for the first time in years, Cole Bennett was no longer in control of what he felt. 3 weeks passed in a quiet kind of tension. Cole returned from his trip to find the house changed. Not in structure, but in feeling. Things ran smoother, warmer. There was a quiet order that hadn't been there before. Ledgers balanced clean. Supplies arrived on time. Even the air inside the house felt lived in. And Lila was at the center of it all. They kept their distance. Careful, proper, measured. Breakfast across from each other. Dinner when he was home. Conversations about work, weather, small things that stayed safe. But something lived beneath it. Cole found himself listening for her footsteps in the hall. Watching the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she focused. Lila learned the rhythm of him. How his shoulders tightened when something troubled him. How he drank his coffee black when his mind was heavy, and forgot it entirely when it wasn't. Neither spoke of it. Neither could ignore it. Then the storm came. The air turned thick that afternoon, heavy, still. By evening, the sky had darkened into something restless and wild. Thunder rolled low and long across the land. Big one coming, Wade muttered as the hand secured the yard. Lila stood on the porch watching. Something about it unsettled her. Then she saw him, a lone rider cutting through the rising wind. Cole. Without thinking, she ran. The wind caught her dress. Rain hit hard and sudden, but she kept going, heart racing as shadow thundered into the yard. Cole swung down just as the sky broke open. What are you doing out here? He shouted, grabbing her arm. You could have been hurt. I saw you riding in, she said, breathless. He didn't let her finish. He pulled her inside. The door slammed behind them. Silence fell sharp and sudden. They stood there, soaked and breathing hard. Her dress clung to her. His shirt did the same. For a second, neither looked away. You're freezing, he said, his voice lower now. Before she could answer, a crash thundered above. The house shook. The north wing! Rosa called from somewhere behind them. They ran. A shattered window let the storm pour inside. Wind howled. Rain soaked everything in reach. Help me! Cole shouted. Together they dragged heavy furniture, blocked the opening as best they could, stuffed cloth into the gaps. The storm fought them every second. Lightning split the sky, then darkness. The lamps went out. Come on, Cole said, finding her hand in the dark. He pulled her through the hall into his study. A match struck. Light returned, soft, golden, close. The storm roared outside. Inside, everything felt different. He poured whiskey, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. His hands lingered just a moment longer than they should. She was still shaking, not just from the cold. Another crack of thunder made her flinch. Without thinking, she stepped closer. He didn't move away. "My parents died during a storm like this," she whispered. His arm came around her, strong, certain. "I'm sorry," he murmured. She looked up at him. He was closer now, closer than ever before. "Cole." He cupped her face. "I tried to stay away," he said, voice raw. "Tried to do what was right." Her breath caught. "I can't." The storm crashed around them. But it no longer mattered. Lila closed the distance. Their lips met. Everything they had held back broke free at once. The fear, the longing, the loneliness. It all burned away in that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, the world had changed. "I don't care what they say," he whispered. "Neither do I," she answered. He held her close as the storm raged on. And for the first time in both their lives, neither of them felt alone, because some moments don't ask permission. They simply happen. And once they do, there is no going back. Part 12, total 445 words. If this tale stirred your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales from the Frontier, where history rides the frontier. Courage is tested and love refuses to die. Until the next tale. Ride on, partner.